Hello everyone, my name is Diana Walker. I'm 28 years old, and for most of my life, my family taught me a brutal lesson. Love had a price tag, and I was the one expected to pay it. What I didn't know that Christmas night was that the carefully polished image my parents lived for was about to shatter in front of everyone who mattered to them. What began as a family holiday dinner would end with sirens, handcuffs, and a truth so ugly it would drag decades of lies into the light. And the people who spent years breaking me down would finally face consequences they could never talk their way out of. If stories about family betrayal, quiet endurance, and accountability arriving at the worst possible moment resonate with you, take a second to like this video, subscribe, and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. I read more of them than you might think. Now, let me take you back to the night everything cracked. The snow had started falling just as I pulled into my parents' driveway in Edina, Minnesota. The house glowed from the inside, every window lit like a picture-perfect Christmas card. Garland framed the door. A wreath hung perfectly centered, red bow fluffed and symmetrical. My mother, Martha Walker, cared deeply about appearances. Order, control, tradition, at least the version she wanted others to see. I balanced two carefully wrapped gifts in my arms as I walked up the familiar stone path. I'd worked late all week at North Star Digital to make sure I could take this night off. Christmas mattered to my family, or at least obedience dressed up as togetherness did. The moment I stepped inside, warmth rushed over me, heat from the fireplace, the smell of roast turkey and cinnamon, the hum of conversation spilling from the dining room. For a split second, I let myself believe this year might be different. Then my mother's voice cut through the house like glass. "Diana, before you go any further, we need to talk, right now." The room went quiet. I froze near the front door, still holding my coat, still not fully inside. My father, Robert Walker, stood a few feet behind her, arms crossed, his broad frame angled just enough to block my path. 20 relatives sat around the dining table, aunts, uncles, cousins, forks paused midair, eyes shifting toward me with open curiosity. This wasn't an accident. Martha never did anything without an audience. "We need to settle Emma's rent for January," she said sharply. "Tonight." I felt my stomach drop. "Mom," I said carefully, lowering my voice, "I already told you. I've covered it 3 times this year. Nathan and I are saving for our wedding. I can't keep..." "Saving?" she snapped, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Your sister is struggling, and you're planning flowers and venues like you're some kind of celebrity." Heat rushed to my face as heads turned fully now. My younger sister, Emma, sat at the far end of the table, eyes on her phone, her perfectly manicured nails tapping the screen. Designer boots. A new coat draped over the chair beside her. She didn't look up. "That's not fair," I said, "and you know it." Martha turned to the table, her voice rising. "Everyone should know Diana makes $78,000 a year, and she can't spare $800 a month to keep her own sister from being homeless." The word echoed in the room. Homeless. A few people gasped. Someone shifted uncomfortably. My grandmother, Eleanor Walker, slowly pushed her chair back, concern lining her face. I swallowed hard. "This isn't appropriate," I said. "Can we not do this in front of everyone?" Robert finally spoke, his tone heavy with disappointment. "You want privacy while your sister might end up on the street?" I glanced at Emma again. She still hadn't looked up. I set my gifts down with shaking hands. "I've already given her $2,400 this year. That's on top of my student loans, my car payment, everything else. I'm not a bank." Martha pulled out her phone. "Transfer it now. $800 for rent, $200 for utilities, $1,000. That's nothing to someone with your salary." The front door opened behind me, letting in a burst of cold air. Nathan Brooks stepped inside, cheeks pink from the cold, holding a bottle of wine and a small bouquet for my mother. His smile faded instantly as he took in the scene. Me cornered by the door, my parents blocking the way, an audience watching like this was entertainment. "What's going on?" he asked quietly. Diana is refusing to help her sister, Martha announced, as if presenting evidence in court. Maybe you can explain family responsibility to her. Nathan moved to my side. I think Diana has been more than generous. Robert's finger shot up. This is family business. Stay out of it. That was the moment I realized something was wrong in a deeper way than usual. Not just the money, not just the pressure. There was a tension in the room I'd never felt before. Tight, electric, like a wire pulled too far. From the corner of my eye, I noticed my cousin Brandon, 16 years old, holding his phone a little too steadily, the screen angled toward the table. I didn't know yet that everything my parents had hidden for decades was about to surface. But standing there, with my back against the door and my family watching me like prey, I felt it in my bones. This Christmas wasn't going to end quietly. No one spoke for a moment after Robert snapped at Nathan. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable, broken only by the faint crackle of the fireplace and the soft clink of silverware someone nervously set down. I became painfully aware of how I was standing, back against the door, coat still on, keys heavy in my pocket like an anchor. It was a position I'd learned early in life. Stay near the exit, just in case. Let's all calm down, my grandmother Eleanor said at last, her voice thin but steady. It's Christmas. Martha didn't even look at her. Her eyes stayed locked on me, sharp and expectant. Christmas is about family, she said. And family helps each other. Or have you forgotten where you came from, Diana? The familiar guilt stirred in my chest, automatic and well-trained. Years of hearing the same lines, the same refrains. We raised you. We sacrificed for you. You owe us. It was a script I could recite in my sleep. I haven't forgotten anything, I said. I just won't keep paying for things that don't add up. That finally got Emma's attention. She looked up from her phone, slow and deliberate, pale blonde hair falling perfectly into place as if she'd practiced the motion. Her expression wasn't embarrassed or apologetic. It was irritated, like I'd interrupted her mid-thought. I told you I'm trying, she said flatly. You don't have to make it a whole thing. I stared at her. I'm not making it anything. I just want the truth. Martha laughed, sharp and humorless. The truth? Don't be dramatic. Emma doesn't need to justify herself to you. Robert nodded. You're the older one. You're supposed to set an example. Nathan's jaw tightened beside me. I felt his hand brush mine, grounding me. An example of what? He asked. Being financially drained until there's nothing left? Robert took a step forward. Not close enough to touch, but close enough to loom. You're awfully comfortable speaking out of turn in our house. It's her house too, Nathan said evenly. At least it used to be. That did it. Martha's face flushed a deep, angry red. Don't you dare rewrite history, she snapped. Diana walked out the moment she thought she was too good for us. College, career, city life. And now she wants to lecture us about money? A few relatives shifted in their chairs. I could feel the judgment settling in, the quiet recalculations. $78,000 a year. Fancy job. Big city. Ungrateful daughter. I opened my mouth to respond, but Martha barreled on. You know what your problem is? She said, turning to the table like a preacher addressing her congregation. You've always been selfish. From the moment you realized you were smart, you thought the world owed you something. That's not true, I said, my voice shaking despite my effort to keep it steady. She waved me off. I'm not finished. You think because you have a title and a paycheck that you're above responsibility. Meanwhile, your sister is barely keeping her head above water. Emma sighed loudly, like she was bored of the conversation. Mom, it's fine. If she doesn't want to help, I'll figure something out. The words should have sounded noble. Instead, they landed hollow. I looked at her again, really looked. The coat, the boots, the phone that looked newer than mine. The way she didn't seem scared or desperate or even particularly concerned. What exactly are you figuring out? I asked quietly. Emma's eyes flicked toward our parents before returning to me. I don't need to explain my finances to you. Then stop asking for my money. Martha slammed her hand on the table. Enough! I'm done with this back and forth. Transfer the money now. I'm not doing that. The words felt foreign in my mouth. Dangerous. Powerful. Robert's expression hardened. Excuse me? I said no, I repeated, louder this time. I'm done being pressured in front of people. I'm done being shamed. And I'm done paying for things I'm not responsible for. A ripple of reaction moved through the room. Whispers, sharp inhales, someone muttering my name like a warning. Martha stepped closer, lowering her voice in a way that felt far more threatening than yelling. You don't say no to us. Nathan shifted, placing himself slightly in front of me without making it obvious. She just did. Robert's eyes narrowed. You need to leave. Gladly, Nathan said. Diana, grab your coat. Before I could move, Martha reached out and grabbed my wrist. Her grip was tighter than it looked. Her nails dug into my skin through the sleeve of my sweater. You are not walking away from this, she hissed. Not until you fix what you've done. Mom, I said sharply, let go of me. She tightened her grip. A few people stood abruptly. Chairs scraped against the floor. I heard my grandmother gasp my name. Let her go, Uncle James said from across the table. His voice was calm, but there was something underneath it, something steely. Martha ignored him. You think humiliating us like this comes without consequences? I didn't humiliate anyone, I said. You did. That was when James stood up fully. Actually, he said, reaching into his pocket, there's something everyone here needs to hear. Martha finally released my wrist and turned toward him, her expression flickering with annoyance. James, don't start. I should have started a long time ago, he replied. He pulled out his phone, his hand steady despite the sudden stillness in the room. I've been recording conversations at family gatherings for the past year, because something about this, about the way Diana's always singled out, didn't sit right with me. Martha's face went pale. What are you talking about? She demanded. James tapped his screen. This. My mother's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. Emma doesn't need a better job. Diana will always pay. She's too soft to say no if we pressure her enough. A collective gasp swept through the dining room. James didn't stop there. He scrolled, then hit play again. My father's voice followed, casual and cold. We trained Diana well. She's been paying Emma's way since high school. Why stop now? The world seemed to tilt. I felt Nathan's hand tighten around mine as forks clattered onto plates, and people erupted into overlapping voices. Martha screamed something about privacy. Robert cursed. My grandmother sank back into her chair, hand pressed to her chest. And at the far end of the table, Emma stared at her phone, her expression unreadable. Whatever game my parents had been playing was no longer under their control. And this Christmas dinner was officially past the point of repair. For a moment, no one spoke. The recording ended, but my mother's voice lingered in the air like smoke that refused to clear. I stood frozen, my mind scrambling to catch up with what my ears had just heard. There it was. Everything I'd spent years doubting about myself, laid bare in two careless sentences. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't too sensitive. I wasn't selfish or ungrateful. I had been managed. Martha recovered first. She always did. Her shock hardened into outrage, sharp and theatrical. How dare you record private family conversations, she snapped at James. That's illegal. James didn't flinch. Minnesota's a one-party consent state. I was part of those conversations. Robert rounded on him. You sanctimonious piece of garbage. You sit at our table, eat our food, and then pull something like this? Someone had to protect Diana, James said calmly. You turned her into a cash machine. The room erupted. People spoke over one another. Questions, accusations, disbelief. Aunt Patricia pressed a hand to her mouth. A cousin whispered something frantic to the person beside her. My grandmother Eleanor stared at my parents like she was seeing them for the first time. I felt like I was underwater. Nathan leaned close, his voice low and steady. "Are you okay?" I nodded automatically, even though I wasn't. My chest felt tight, my heartbeat too loud in my ears. Across the table, Emma still hadn't said a word. She sat perfectly still, phone resting in her hand, eyes flicking up only long enough to assess the damage. "Is this true?" Eleanor asked suddenly, her voice cutting through the noise. "Emma, have you been manipulating your sister?" Every sound seemed to fall away as Emma slowly lifted her head. "It's not manipulation," she said with a shrug. "Mom and Dad said Diana wanted to help, that it made her feel needed." My stomach dropped. "I never said that," I whispered. Emma's gaze slid back to her phone. "You never checked either." The casual cruelty of it hit harder than the recordings. Years of stress, of skipped vacations, of guilt-laced phone calls, dismissed like a misunderstanding over the weather. Nathan straightened. "We're leaving." "She's not going anywhere," Robert said, stepping forward, blocking the path to the door again. "Not until this is resolved." "It is resolved," Nathan shot back. "She's done." Martha moved fast. One moment she was across the room, the next her hand clamped around my arm again, nails biting into skin. "You selfish little witch," she hissed. "After everything we've done for you." "Let go of me," I said, my voice rising. "You're hurting me." "Good," she said. "Maybe pain will teach you something." That was when I heard James again. "There's more," he said quietly. Martha froze. James scrolled through his phone, his face dark. 17 recordings. 17 times you discussed how to guilt Diana into paying, how to pressure her in public, how to make sure she never felt comfortable saying no. Robert lunged toward him. "Turn that off." Before anyone could react, a new voice cut in, nervous, adolescent, unmistakably out of place. Aunt Martha?" Everyone turned. Brandon stood near the corner of the room, phone held upright now, his face pale. "This is live." "What?" Martha snapped. "It's Facebook Live," he said. "Like, 300 people are watching." The color drained from my mother's face. "Turn that off right now." "I can't," Brandon said helplessly. "People are sharing it." My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out with shaking hands. A text from my boss lit up the cracked screen. "Diana, someone just sent me a video. Are you safe?" The room descended into chaos. Martha screamed at Brandon. Robert threatened lawsuits. Relatives shouted, argued, took sides. Emma kept typing, thumbs moving faster now, jaw tight. Nathan grabbed my hand. "We're leaving, now." This time, no one stopped us. Everyone was too busy scrambling to control a narrative that had already escaped them. Cold air hit my face as we stepped outside, snow swirling under the porch light. My breath came in short, shaky bursts. From inside the house, my grandmother's voice rose above the din. "Enough! This family has become poison." Nathan guided me toward his car, but before we reached it, my phone rang again. Eleanor's name flashed on the screen. "Diana, dear," she said, her voice trembling. "Please come back. Your mother is having a breakdown. She's throwing things. We need to handle this as a family." I closed my eyes. Despite everything, the conditioning ran deep. 5 minutes, I told Nathan quietly, just to make sure she's okay. He didn't argue. He just nodded, jaw tight. Walking back into that house felt like stepping into a disaster zone. Plates lay shattered across the floor. The white tablecloth was streaked with gravy and wine. The gifts I'd brought sat crushed near the doorway. Martha spotted me instantly. "Do you see what you've done?" she screamed. "You've ruined Christmas." "I didn't ruin anything," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "You did." Someone asked if Brandon was still recording. He nodded, holding his phone low. "Mom said to document everything, for insurance." Robert emerged from the kitchen, face purple with rage. "Your little stunt has gone viral. People from my golf club are texting. Martha's book club." "Good," I said. The word hung in the air. Maybe public shame would finally do what private conversations never had. I straightened. I'm done. I'm not paying Emma's rent. I'm not apologizing. And I'm not staying. Martha laughed, sharp and hollow. You're done when we say you're done. Emma stood up then, finally, phone still in her hand. For one reckless second, hope sparked in my chest. This has gone too far, she said. My breath caught. I think we should cut Diana off completely, Emma continued calmly. She's too selfish to be part of this family. I'll manage my rent without her. The betrayal landed like a physical blow. Before I could respond, Martha ripped my phone from my hand and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the wall. That's assault, Nathan said from the doorway. Robert moved toward him, fists clenched. And as I stepped back instinctively, trying to create space, my heel caught on broken porcelain. I stumbled, hard, straight into the china cabinet. Glass exploded around me. Pain sliced through my palm as something sharp cut deep. Blood dripped onto the carpet. Look what you've done! Martha shrieked. The room spun. Somewhere through the ringing in my ears, I heard Brandon's voice again, faint but urgent. There are 12,000 people watching now, he said. And someone just commented they're calling 911. I sank to the floor, clutching my hand, surrounded by shattered glass, my family shouting over one another. And in that moment, bleeding on my parents' living room floor, while the world watched, I understood something with terrifying clarity. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. It was abuse, and there was no going back to pretending otherwise. The pain came in waves, sharp, blinding, then distant, like it belonged to someone else. I sat on the floor amid shattered porcelain and splintered glass, my back against the broken cabinet, my injured hand pressed tight against my sweater as blood seeped through my fingers. The carpet beneath me bloomed dark red. Somewhere above me, voices clashed and overlapped, too loud to make sense of. "Oh my God," someone whispered. "Don't touch anything. Call an ambulance." "I told you to turn that off." Brandon's voice cut through the chaos, trembling now. "I didn't do anything. People are already calling, I swear. Someone said 911 is on the way." Aunt Patricia pushed through the crowd, her nurse's instincts snapping into place. "Move," she ordered, kneeling in front of me. "Diana, look at me. Stay with me." "I'm here," I said weakly, though my vision swam. She gently took my wrist, examining the cut with practiced efficiency. "You're going to need stitches." As she lifted my sleeve, her hand stilled. Her expression changed. "What?" I asked, fear creeping in. Patricia slowly pushed the fabric higher, exposing my forearm. The room went quiet again, not the tense silence from before, but something heavier. Older bruises bloomed beneath the skin, yellowed and purple, half hidden but unmistakable. "These aren't from tonight," Patricia said, loud enough for everyone to hear. My heart sank. Martha let out a sharp laugh. "She's clumsy, always has been." Patricia looked up at her, eyes blazing. "These are healing at different stages." "Diana, how long has this been happening?" "It's not," I started, the reflex to protect rising automatically. "They don't usually—" "Don't you dare," Robert snapped. "Don't imply we abuse our daughter." Patricia stood, her voice steady but fierce. "I'm a mandatory reporter. What I'm seeing is consistent with ongoing physical abuse." The words landed like a bomb. Martha's confidence cracked. "You're overreacting." "No," Patricia said. "I'm reacting appropriately." Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Nathan knelt beside me, his face pale with fury. "You're safe," he said softly. "I've got you." I looked past him, to Emma. She stood a few feet away, phone still in her hand, eyes unreadable. Not shocked, not panicked, watching. When the paramedics arrived, the house seemed to shrink around us. Questions, lights, the smell of antiseptic cutting through pine and cinnamon. Patricia wrapped my hand in clean cloths as they loaded me onto the stretcher. As they wheeled me out, I caught sight of my grandmother standing in the doorway, tears streaking her face. "I'm so sorry," she mouthed. The hospital was a blur of white walls and fluorescent light. The sharp sting of numbing injections, the tug of sutures pulling skin together. I stared at the ceiling while a nurse worked, counting breaths to keep from shaking apart. My phone was gone, shattered, silent. Nathan sat nearby, speaking quietly with a police officer. I heard fragments: assault, witnesses, Livestream. A soft knock came at the bathroom door where I waited after being stitched. "Diana," my grandmother's voice said. "May I come in?" She looked smaller under the harsh lights, older somehow. She took my uninjured hand gently. "I should have spoken up years ago," she whispered. "Your mother learned this behavior from somewhere. I didn't stop it." I swallowed hard, exhausted beyond words. Before I could respond, Brandon appeared in the doorway, eyes wide. "It's everywhere," he said. "The live stream, 200,000 views and climbing." My stomach twisted. Then Nathan returned, his face grim. "The police want to take a statement, but there's something else." He hesitated. "My sister did some digging. Your parents have been claiming you as a dependent on their taxes for years." I stared at him. "What?" "5 years," he said quietly. "While you were living on your own, the hits kept coming. And then finally, Emma asked to see me. I didn't want to. Every part of me wanted distance, silence, an end to this night. But curiosity, or maybe the need for answers, won." She stepped into the room slowly, her composure finally cracked. Designer coat wrinkled, eyes red. "I know you hate me," she said. "You should." I said nothing. "There's something you need to know," she continued. "I haven't needed rent money for over a year." The words didn't register at first. "I got promoted," she said. "Senior developer. My salary is actually higher than yours." The room tilted. "I saved everything you gave me," Emma went on, voice eerily calm. $60,000. I was planning to buy a house." My chest constricted. "Why?" I whispered. "Because Mom and Dad told me to," she said. "They said it was teaching you responsibility, and they took a cut." Silence swallowed us whole. Emma looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time I saw fear beneath the calculation. I was scared they'd turn on me next. Police radios crackled in the hallway. Nathan stepped closer to me, protective and solid. "We're leaving," he said firmly. "And this time, anyone who tries to stop us will answer to the law." As officers moved down the corridor toward my parents, I realized something with quiet certainty. The night had already destroyed their image. What came next would dismantle everything else, and there would be no undoing it. The police station lobby felt nothing like safety. It was bright and sterile, every sound amplified. The scrape of chairs, the murmur of radios, the distant ring of phones. I sat wrapped in a thin hospital blanket, my stitched hand throbbing in time with my heartbeat. Nathan stayed close, one arm resting lightly across my shoulders like an anchor, reminding me I was still here, still upright, still breathing. Across the room, Emma sat alone. Not beside our parents, not near anyone, just a single plastic chair pushed against the wall, her coat folded neatly in her lap, eyes fixed on the floor. The separation felt deliberate, symbolic, as if some invisible line had finally been crossed. A female detective introduced herself quietly and asked if I felt well enough to give a statement. I nodded. At that point, it felt like the only thing left I could control was telling the truth. She led us into a small interview room. The door closed with a soft click that sounded final in a way I wasn't prepared for. As I spoke about the money, the pressure, the public shaming, the grip on my arm that turned bruises into routine, I watched the detective's expression shift from professional neutrality to something tighter, more intent. Halfway through, she stopped taking notes and looked directly at me. "Has this happened before?" "Yes," I said. The word came out easily now. Too easily. "Not like tonight, but enough." When the interview ended, Nathan squeezed my hand gently, careful of the stitches. "You did good," he murmured. Outside the room, voices rose again. My parents had arrived. Martha Walker stood near the front desk, phone held high, narrating into the camera like she was giving a tour. "We're being detained without cause," she announced to her followers. "Our ungrateful daughter staged a scene and now the police are harassing us." Robert paced beside her, face dark with fury, whispering urgently to a man in a cheap suit who could only be their lawyer. Emma stood up when she saw me. "Diana," she said softly. I stopped a few feet away. "What?" She swallowed. "I have evidence. Videos, bank statements, recordings, everything." I stared at her. "You had it this whole time." "Yes. And you let it continue." Her shoulders sagged. "I was scared." "So was I." The words weren't loud, but they landed hard. Emma flinched. "I'll testify," she said quickly, "against them. I already transferred the money back to you, all of it, plus interest, $60,000. I felt nothing. No relief, no vindication, just a hollow ache where trust used to live. "Keep it," I said. "Or don't. It doesn't change what happened." Her eyes filled. "I know." Before she could say more, an officer approached. "Emma Walker, we need to speak with you." As she followed him away, the detective turned back to me. "There's more," she said carefully. "We've received multiple reports tonight, from viewers, from family members, from medical professionals." Patricia's voice echoed in my head, mandatory reporter. "And," the detective continued, "a judge in Oregon has submitted a sworn affidavit." My breath caught. "A judge?" "Yes. Catherine Williams." The name hit me like a shockwave. My grandmother's sister, the aunt I'd never met, the one Martha had erased from family history as if she'd never existed. "She reports a pattern of financial coercion and abuse consistent with what you described," the detective said. "Going back 40 years. 40 years. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't chaos. It was design. Rehearsed. Refined. Nathan exhaled slowly beside me. "They've been doing this a long time." "Yes," I said. "And they didn't start with us." The arrest happened quickly after that. Martha screamed as officers read her rights, her live stream audience watching every second. Robert tried to argue, to threaten, to posture his way out of handcuffs like he always had. It didn't work. As they were led past me, Martha locked eyes with me, her face twisted with fury and disbelief. "You destroyed this family," she hissed. I met her gaze, steady for the first time in my life. "No," I said quietly. "You did." The doors closed behind them with a sound that felt like a chapter ending. Hours later, after statements and signatures and too much coffee, Nathan guided me outside. Snow still fell, soft and steady, covering the ugliness of the night in clean white silence. Nathan's phone vibrated, a message from an unknown number. "Hi, this is Melissa Chang. I'm a trial attorney and a friend of Nathan's sister. I saw the live stream. I'm on my way." I leaned back against the car, exhaustion finally crashing over me. My hand ached. My head throbbed. My heart felt like it had been split open and examined under fluorescent light. But beneath all of it, under the shock, the grief, the betrayal, something else stirred. Clarity. For the first time, I wasn't wondering how to fix my family. I was wondering how to live without them. And that question, terrifying as it was, felt like the beginning of freedom. The days that followed blurred together, measured in interviews, paperwork, and the low hum of exhaustion that never quite lifted. Christmas passed quietly that year, not with carols or candles, but with legal forms spread across a kitchen table and my stitched hand wrapped in fresh bandages. Melissa Chang arrived before dawn the next morning, still in her work suit, hair pulled back tight, eyes sharp and focused. She didn't waste time on comfort she knew I wasn't ready to accept. "They left a paper trail," she said, opening her laptop. "A bad one." Nathan stood behind me, one hand resting lightly on my shoulder as Melissa pulled up document after document. Credit cards opened in my name that I had never seen. Utility accounts tied to my social security number, but linked to my parents' address. loan applications flagged for irregularities. An attempted home equity loan against my condo stopped only because the bank had questioned a forged deed. "They tried to steal my home," I whispered. "Yes," Melissa said gently. "And they would have if someone at the bank hadn't done their job." The word steal felt too small. This wasn't theft born of desperation. It was systematic, deliberate, comfortable. Adult Protective Services contacted me later that day, then the IRS, then a forensic accountant assigned to the case. Each conversation followed the same pattern: calm voices, precise questions, and an undercurrent of disbelief as the scope widened. "What you're describing," one investigator said carefully, "is long-term financial exploitation." The charges began stacking themselves without anyone needing to force them. Fraud, identity theft, tax evasion, assault, elder abuse. My grandmother, Eleanor, was interviewed next. When they reviewed her accounts, they found forged signatures on checks, unauthorized withdrawals, even a reverse mortgage taken out without her knowledge. "I thought I was helping the girls," she said later, tears filling her eyes. "I didn't know I was being robbed too." James called me that night, his voice heavy with guilt. "I should have played the recordings sooner." "You played them when it mattered," I told him, and I meant it. Emma's testimony came 2 days later. She sat across from me in a small conference room at the station, a therapist, Dr. Sarah Winters, beside her. Emma looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, shoulders rounded, hands folded tight in her lap. "They controlled me differently," she said quietly. "When you left for college, they told me you abandoned us, that you only helped because they forced you. They monitored my calls, my texts. If I tried to tell you the truth, they threatened to call my employer, to tell my boyfriend about my eating disorder. They had my medical records from when I was a minor." She rolled up her sleeve, revealing old scars I'd never known existed. "I documented everything," she continued. "Not because I was brave, because I was scared." I didn't forgive her in that moment, but I understood her. And that understanding shifted something fundamental between us. When Catherine Williams flew in from Oregon, the story finally completed itself. She was composed, calm, unmistakably authoritative, the kind of woman who had built a life far away from the chaos she'd escaped. Sitting across from her in Melissa's office, I felt like I was looking at a future version of myself. "They did the same thing to me," Catherine said. "College tuition, my first car, my wedding, always with guilt, always with an audience. When I finally said no, Martha cut me off, told everyone I was dead to her." "How did you survive?" I asked. "I left," she said simply, "and I never looked back." The legal process moved faster than I expected once everything was on the table. With the Livestream footage, recordings, bank statements, and multiple witnesses, the prosecutor didn't hesitate. Bail was denied. Assets were frozen. My parents were held pending trial. The night before the preliminary hearing, I lay awake listening to the soft rhythm of Nathan's breathing beside me, my mind racing despite the exhaustion. "What if they still find a way out?" I asked quietly. He turned toward me, eyes steady. "Then we keep going. But this time, you're not alone." The hearing itself was brief and devastating. 23 counts of fraud, 18 counts of identity theft, tax evasion, assault, elder abuse, not guilty pleas, no remorse, no acknowledgement. As my parents were led away in handcuffs, I searched my chest for the familiar guilt, the reflexive ache. It wasn't there. What replaced it wasn't satisfaction or triumph, it was resolve. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered, microphones poised. Melissa handed me a prepared statement, but Emma stepped forward first. "They stole more than money," she said, voice trembling but clear. "They stole our trust, our relationship as sisters, and years of our lives. But they didn't steal our future." When it was my turn, I spoke without notes. "Financial abuse thrives in silence," I said. "In shame. in the idea that family harm should be hidden. Tonight, that silence ends. The headlines followed us for weeks. Interviews, messages from strangers who recognized their own lives in mine, emails from relatives who admitted they'd suspected something but hadn't known how to speak up. The system my parents relied on, secrecy, guilt, isolation, had collapsed under its own weight. And as the trial date approached, I realized something quietly transformative. This story was no longer about what they had done to me. It was about what I was no longer willing to carry. For the first time in my life, the future didn't feel like something I had to earn through sacrifice. It felt like something I was finally allowed to choose. The courthouse was quieter than I expected. No shouting, no drama spilling into the hallways. Just the muted shuffle of shoes against polished floors and the low murmur of voices kept deliberately calm. By the time we took our seats, the weight of what was about to happen had settled into my chest like something solid and immovable. Emma sat beside me, not close enough to touch, but close enough that I could feel her presence. Nathan was on my other side, steady as ever. Behind us, a small row of familiar faces, James, Patricia, my grandmother Eleanor, and Catherine, who sat with the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly how this system worked. When my parents were brought in, the room shifted. 6 months in county jail had changed them. Martha's carefully maintained image had cracked completely. Gray roots pulled into a careless ponytail, her posture stiff with indignation rather than authority. Robert looked smaller somehow, his usual bulk diminished by an oversized suit and the absence of control. They didn't look at me at first. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The formalities passed in a blur, and then the charges were read aloud, one after another, stacking higher than I could have imagined when I walked into that Christmas dinner believing this was just another argument about money. Fraud, identity theft, tax evasion, assault, elder abuse. Each count felt like a quiet confirmation that what I'd lived through had names, definitions, consequences. When the prosecutor called my name, my legs felt unsteady as I stood. I forced myself to meet my parents' eyes as I took the stand. Their expressions didn't soften. If anything, they hardened, offended, wounded, certain they were the wronged party here. The prosecutor guided me carefully, starting with the financial abuse. Bank statements appeared on a screen behind us, every transfer I'd made to Emma, believing I was helping my struggling sister. Then the credit cards I never opened, the attempted loan against my condo, the tax filings that claimed me as a dependent long after I'd moved out. "Did you consent to any of this?" she asked. "No," I said. "I didn't even know it was happening." "And when you tried to set boundaries?" I inhaled slowly. I was punished, publicly shamed, threatened, sometimes physically hurt. The courtroom was silent. When the defense attorney stood, her tone was polite, distant. "Miss Walker, isn't it true you voluntarily gave money to your sister?" "Yes," I said. "No one forced you to write those checks." I met her gaze. Coercion doesn't always look like force. Sometimes it looks like guilt you're raised with from childhood, like believing love is conditional, like being told your family will suffer if you say no. She pressed on. "You're a successful professional. Surely you could have walked away sooner." I didn't look at my parents when I answered. It took 28 years and being assaulted in front of witnesses for me to understand that saying no was allowed. When Emma testified, the room changed again. Her voice shook at first, but it grew steadier as she described a different kind of control: monitoring, isolation, threats tied to her mental health. Medical records were entered into evidence. Recordings followed, the accountant's confession, Catherine's affidavit outlining the same abuse 40 years earlier. This wasn't a family dispute, it was a pattern. When my grandmother took the stand, her hands trembled. She spoke about forged checks, missing savings, the guilt of not realizing sooner that she too had been a victim. "I thought I was protecting my family," she said softly. "Instead, I helped them hurt each other." By the final day, There was no drama left in the courtroom, only inevitability. The judge didn't rush her verdict. She spoke carefully, deliberately. This case has been described as a family matter blown out of proportion. Let me be clear. Financial abuse is not a misunderstanding. Physical assault is not discipline. Exploitation disguised as parenting is still exploitation. She turned to my parents. You were entrusted with the care of your children. Instead, you treated them as resources. The words felt like air returning to my lungs. Guilty on all counts. Martha collapsed into sobs. Robert's face flushed dark with rage, his mouth opening as if to argue even now. Sentencing followed swiftly. 7 years in state prison, full restitution, assets liquidated, a 20-year no-contact order. As officers moved to escort them out, Martha twisted toward me, her voice sharp and broken. You destroyed this family. I stood, my hands steady at my sides. No, I said, you did. I just stopped protecting the lie. The gavel fell. And in that sound, final, undeniable, I felt something I'd never known before. Not victory, freedom. The days after the verdict felt strangely quiet. Not peaceful. Quiet in the way a storm leaves silence behind, heavy and unfamiliar. The kind that makes you realize how much noise you've been living with without noticing. For the first time in my life, no one was demanding anything from me. No urgent calls, no guilt-laced messages, no calculations running in the back of my mind about how much love would cost this month. I didn't know what to do with that kind of silence. Emma and I started therapy together a week later. The first session was awkward, our chairs angled slightly away from each other. Both of us unsure where to begin now that the enemy we'd been trained to orbit was gone. Dr. Winters didn't rush us. She let the quiet sit until it softened. They taught you to survive in opposite ways, she said gently. Diana learned to give until there was nothing left. Emma learned to hide until she was safe. Emma stared at the floor. I watched her hands twist together, the same nervous habit she'd had as a kid. I thought if I stayed useful, she said quietly, they wouldn't hurt me. Something in my chest loosened. Not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding. Real understanding. The kind that doesn't erase damage but finally explains it. We didn't fix everything in those sessions. Some days we barely spoke. Other days we cried until our faces hurt. Healing, I learned, wasn't linear. It was uncomfortable and slow and full of moments where you wondered if you were doing it wrong. Nathan was steady through all of it. He never pushed me to move faster. Never told me to look on the bright side. He just showed up. Coffee in the mornings, his jacket draped over my shoulders when I forgot how cold Minnesota winters could be. His hand finding mine in quiet moments when my thoughts spiraled. One night, curled up on the couch, I finally said the thing I'd been afraid to voice. What if I don't know who I am without them? He didn't answer right away. He just brushed his thumb gently over my knuckles. Then we figured it out together. The wedding, which we'd postponed without hesitation, became something different in my mind. Not an obligation, not a milestone I had to earn, but a choice. One made freely, without fear of backlash or manipulation. Catherine stayed in town longer than planned. We spent hours talking about boundaries, about the first year after leaving, about the grief that comes even when escape is the right decision. They don't disappear from your head just because they disappear from your life, she told me over coffee one afternoon. But one day, you realize their voice isn't the loudest anymore. My grandmother, Eleanor, moved in with a quiet determination I'd never seen before. She updated her will, changed her accounts, apologized. Not once, but often. I can't undo what I didn't see, she said, holding my hand. But I can choose differently now. So could I. Some nights, the memories still came uninvited. The sound of Martha's voice, the way Robert blocked doorways, the moment glass shattered and everything changed. Trauma doesn't vanish just because justice arrives, but something else arrived with it. Space. Space to say no without flinching. Space to rest without guilt. Space to imagine a future that didn't revolve around fixing broken people who never wanted to change. Emma and I weren't suddenly close. We didn't pretend the past hadn't happened, but we started over, carefully, honestly, with boundaries instead of obligation. One afternoon, as we left therapy together, she stopped in the parking lot. "I don't expect you to trust me," she said, "but I want to earn it." I nodded. That's the first honest thing we've ever had. It wasn't a happy ending. It was something better. It was a beginning. Quiet, imperfect, and finally our own. 5 years later, I stood in my backyard watching my daughter run through the grass, her laughter cutting clean and bright through the afternoon air. Her name was Eleanor, Ellie for short, named after the grandmother who finally found the courage to speak before it was too late. She was 3 years old, fearless, convinced the world existed to be explored rather than survived. Nathan manned the grill nearby, pretending not to smile every time she shrieked with delight as he lifted her high into the air. Emma sat on the porch steps with her son, a toddler just learning how to balance bravery with caution. We weren't perfect, we weren't magically healed, but we were present, honest, learning how to build something without fear baked into the foundation. "Do you ever think about them?" Emma asked quietly, nodding toward the house as if our parents might still exist somewhere in the corners of our lives. "Sometimes," I admitted, mostly as a reminder of what not to repeat. Prison and therapy had not rewritten the past. Consequences didn't erase harm, and forgiveness, real forgiveness, didn't require access to my life or my children. I'd learned that the hardest boundary wasn't cutting contact. It was letting go of the fantasy that accountability would turn them into different people. Ellie ran toward me, arms outstretched. "Mama, watch me!" "I'm watching," I said, crouching down as she launched herself into my arms. And I meant it. We told our children the truth, carefully and honestly, when they were old enough to ask. Not with bitterness, not with lies softened into something easier to swallow. Just the truth. That some people don't know how to love safely, and that walking away can be the bravest thing you ever do. The work Emma and I started together grew into something we never planned. A foundation, workshops, resources for people trapped in family systems that used guilt and money as weapons. Messages poured in from strangers who recognized themselves in our story. From people who thought they were alone because abuse didn't leave visible bruises. Financial abuse thrives in silence. We learned that early. We learned it the hard way. But silence breaks the moment someone says, "This isn't normal. This isn't love." One afternoon, years after the trial, a letter arrived from the prison system. Martha's handwriting wavered across the envelope. I didn't open it right away. When I finally did, the pages inside were filled with justifications, accusations, and finally, at the very end, 4 words that hovered uncertainly on the paper. Maybe we were wrong. I folded the letter carefully and put it away. Accountability doesn't always arrive in full sentences, and sometimes closure looks like choosing not to respond. Life moved forward anyway. Nathan and I kept our wedding date after all. Not because everything was resolved, but because joy doesn't need permission from pain. We stood surrounded by chosen family, not obligation. No guilt, no leverage, just love freely given and freely returned. Emma gave the maid of honor speech. Her voice shook, but she didn't hide from it. "They tried to teach us that love was something you earn by suffering," she said. "But we're building something different, something honest." As I looked around that room, at the people who stayed, who showed up without keeping score, I understood something I wish I'd known earlier. Family isn't defined by blood, it's defined by behavior, and the greatest revenge isn't survival, it's freedom. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt trapped between family obligation and self-preservation, please know you're not alone. Have you ever had to set boundaries with someone who should have protected you? What helped you choose yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And if you found value here, take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and share it with anyone who might need the reminder that love should never come with a price tag. Until next time, be gentle with yourself, fierce with your boundaries, and remember, your healing is possible.